Hello, I am Thor. I am the lead solo dev of the War of the Worlds real-time strategy game project, which is currently an untitled project, but that will change pretty soon. For now, I would like to discuss in our first devlog my expectations for the game, my vision, and just discuss what to expect with these devlogs for everyone watching. Some of you have most likely played the 1998 real-time strategy game, Jeff Wayne's The War of the Worlds. That game was pretty well received when it came out in '98, but it has mostly fallen to the wayside because there are some efforts to bring it to modern operating systems. It was originally native to Windows 98, and I think it at most ran on Windows XP. I'm not 100% sure. But either way, it was built for 32-bit operating system. So obviously, needs to be brought to modern hardware. Hasn't really happened yet. There are some efforts to do it. There are some ways to get around it with virtual boxes and whatnot. But that aside, many of you are probably familiar with that game. Well, this game is a more or less spiritual successor to that title. But I have my own vision for the goal of this project. And that is to basically make this a modern real-time strategy game with a lot of the modern accoutrements, all the features you would expect from a modern title, and also put my own vision into the game beyond just being a simple spiritual successor. Because let's be honest, reskinning what was an isometric game built on 3D terrain with sprite-based units would be pretty easy nowadays, right? But I really want to go beyond that. I want to capture some of that original innovation that we saw in that game, some of the now classic nature of the gameplay loop, and add a lot of modern stuff on top of that, and really make it a polished, finished product. So with that out of the way, let's talk about what I have already, and some systems, and what I plan to implement. So first off, for anyone who's not familiar with the old RTS, the game worked with two gameplay loops. There was the battle map, where you controlled individual units on the field, and the strategic map. And in this way, it's kind of like Total War titles, right? The strategic map, though, was actually also real-time with pausing and time acceleration built in. So units had realistic travel speeds between different districts that formed the strategic map. And this was pretty innovative for the time. Some other titles have since used similar systems, but we're also using that system in this game. So you'll have a strategic map where you collect resources, you manage districts, all these other things, you build buildings, and then you go into the battle map to resolve conflict, resolve battles once you move units either on the attack or are attacked. Let's quickly talk about what to expect from the strategic map. You'll have resources for each faction. The Martians will have copper, blood, and heavy metals, which represent things like uranium, plutonium, etc. The humans will have coal, manpower, and steel. And the manpower mechanic will tie into some other mechanics that we'll talk about shortly, notably civilians. So let's jump ahead and talk about the Martian faction. The Martian faction, it's the meat of the game right now. The human faction will be added later. My goal is to set up the Martian faction and get the game fully playable with them, and eventually add the human faction later. The Martian faction has basically two types of units right now. Tripods, which are used for offensive operations. They have more long-range weapons, and support units, which may not have the long-range weapons of the fighting units, but accomplish different things. And this is general. There will be a few other categories of units that do certain things, like flying machines. You'll have combat units that do fulfill a lot of support roles, like the Tempest in the original RTS game. which was like a psi warfare unit, but it also had powerful weapons. In these units, you'll have different abilities. So you'll have black smoke, psychological, and psi warfare. Those are two different things. So psychological warfare would be like the ULA, right? The battle cry of the Martians. So that will have psychological effects on units on the field. And you also have psi abilities, which is mind control, which will also have a limited effect. Then you have melee-related abilities. So these are things you see in most of the adaptations for the War of the Worlds IP, with those classic images of the handling machines attacking humans, bashing people against trees, etc. Got to make sure that makes it into the game, so we will have some melee in the game. And that having been said, let's quickly talk about what kind of units you're going to expect to see on the field playing as the Martians on the enemy side. In the human faction, you have basically 4 distinct unit classes and a 5th class that doesn't really fit with the others. You have infantry, cavalry, wheeled units, and armored units like tanks. You also have the 5th category, which are cannons. Now, cannons can be built as strategic emplacements like the original game. So in other words, during downtime, when you're not making units in a district, you can build defensive cannon emplacements. But cannons will also be movable. Like regular units, they'll just be very slow, requiring limbering and unlimbering. Maybe they'll be transportable by wheeled vehicles, we'll see. All of the human units use ballistics for the most part, at least for the large caliber weapons, meaning a lot of the hit detection in the game will work using collision of ballistic systems. Whereas the Martians, in contrast, have mostly hit scan detection for their weapons, with exceptions, obviously. So let's talk about what is currently in the game. Let me load up my scene here. Okay. So really quick rundown. You have a basic RTS camera with zooming and limits, rotation. You also have WASD controls and a speed modifier, so you can hold shift to make your camera move faster. Camera also has built-in logic to do cutscenes, cinematics, animated cameras, things like that. There will also be picture-in-picture heads-up information for combat. So if a unit sees an enemy unit, you'll get a little portrait showing the line of sight of your unit making contact, and it will show you a little, like a first-person view of the enemy unit from the tripod's perspective. That's built in, it's not functional yet, but we're getting there. So let's quickly look at our tripods here. These are obviously all placeholder. They don't have camera collision yet. But you can see we have a simple selection system that works with marquee or direct selection. And when I click a unit, you can see we have a few things appear on the screen. Well, first of all, up here we have our unit bar. This tells us all the units we currently have deployed on the field. And as we select different ones, you can see which ones we have selected. This gives us heads up info like health. There are also other icons down here that are just not populated because there are no status modifiers on these guys, but there are all sorts of modifiers like, is it firing? Is it taking damage? Is it in combat? Is it auto firing? Is it on an ability cooldown, etc. So all of those things will be listed under here to give you heads up information. Now you see when I select a unit, again, over here you have a few things populate this bottom left section of the UI. This is your auto fire toggle, tells your unit whether or not you want to do automatically attack enemy units. Currently disabled for this because I don't want him just shooting randomly. This is your ability bar. So each unit has its own configurable abilities. When you select one, it will populate the ability bar. Right now, this is black smoke that you see here. There's no cooldown on it yet. You can see this meter here, but there will be cooldown on this. Here you have different ability buttons like move, attack order, defend, rotate, or rather stop and rotate, things like that. Down here you have a portrait. This is a 3D scene, not animated, but it is fully 3D and fully updated every frame. So this will show you different combat status information about the unit. In the completed, well, hopefully in the completed game, there will be no health bar here visible on the screen, and there will be one up here, but you'll have to rely on your portrait to tell you visually how much damage the unit has taken. Kind of in the vein of a lot of classic RTSs, right? Where you see events on the unit portrait that kind of tell you what's happening to the unit, right? So if the tripod's taking fire, you'll see flashes and things like that. The cabin will be rocking. And if he starts taking damage, well, your Martian's going to start getting beaten up. Because at the end of the day, with these machines, the Martian is the brain of the unit, right? So if the Martian dies, that is what kills the unit more often than other types of kills. But there are exceptions to that, like if you knock out a leg. We'll talk about that later. Over here, you also have this indicator, which is the heat scene indicator. And this tells you how much heat your current weapon has built up. Now you can see there's more room here. That's because units will have more than one weapon. You can either add them through upgrades, or later units will come with a number of different weapons that are each targetable and can do their own thing, can target different types of units, etc. And what this does is tells us how much heat that weapon has built up. And again, this is a 3D scene, so you can kind of see here my vision for what will eventually be an immersive UI, which will have all these 3D components that will kind of show you the inside and cutaways of the tripod to sort of give you this like visual feedback of what's happening in the unit, right? And you can kind of see the coils inside the heat ray warming up and overheating, venting coolant, and all of that will be built into the UI. That's the hope. Okay. So damage system. Obviously units take and deal damage. There are 3 types of damage, and also morale. So there's burn damage, hard damage, soft damage, and morale. And morale isn't really damage because it doesn't alter or affect the unit's HP, but it still has effects. So hard damage, obviously effective against armored units. Soft damage is effective against civilians, infantry, and cavalry. I do have a basic targeting UI built in right now. Tripods look for their nearest target of opportunity. Most of that's currently turned off because I have just these little test targets here for us to show off just how the firing works, but that's all built into the game already. We have a few things to show you right off the bat. We have modular walking with inverse kinematics. In fact, let me restart the scene here because some of these effects time out after a certain amount of time because this is a test environment. All right, so you can see my guy walks here. He's kicking up dust on each step. The joints of the legs are emitting puffs of smoke. Obviously, these effects are just placeholder right now. But all of this helps to give you that impression the tripod is, you know, alive. And also the hood of the tripod will bob on movement. Rotation will not quite be this smooth, and you'll have a little bit of, I guess, slop in the movement of the base compared to the legs to give it a little bit more of a lifelike appearance than it currently has. There's also, obviously, cued movement. That's not properly updating, but it will. I'll fix that pretty soon. You can kind of see how it works. It's just not updating on its own. It's only updating when I select units. But yeah, there's a cued movement system in the game, right? So you can give any number of orders. Tripod will follow them in order. This also works with attack orders too. So if you're attacking something, you can still give orders, move orders, and the unit won't stop attacking. So let's get him just set up right here. Now you can see, I don't know if you saw this already, but obviously the tripod follows terrain, and when he starts moving up terrain, you will see that he adjusts his altitude once he reaches his movement point. Yep, there you go. So obviously stuff like that will be very helpful in different settings where you're walking over buildings and things like that. Okay, now let's show off some of the attack. Designated the target, the heat ray points, and fires. And you see over here you have the heat bar filling up. There you go. Fills it up, enters cooldown mode, cools down, starts the cycle over again. And you have different variables here to control the rate of the firing cycle and all these other things. And you can see the targeting circle here to show you what you've got targeted. Again, placeholder for now. But there you go. That's how attacking works. It's already pretty much functional. Obviously, there are some things that need to be implemented. Your weapon has a field of view or a arc of fire to it, which will limit what you can engage depending on where your tripod's facing. Now let's look at one of the abilities that are already built into the game. So I have a few different abilities ready, but right now we're just showing off black smoke. There you go. Pretty nice. You got collision on that guy. You also have effects when it hits the ground. And just like that, you've laid a black smoke screen, and this will occlude enemy line of sight. And now you'll notice it just disappeared because, again, we're testing. But I click the icon here, click on the map, and it fires in that direction. There you go. Obviously, black smoke, you can see how it would be very important to use it when your enemy has ballistic weapons that work with ballistic hit detection, right? Because basically, think about if you're shooting at these tripods, right? You hit the core and that will cause HP damage, but you can hit these legs too, which will have smaller health pools. And if you manage to disable a leg, well, the whole tripod comes down. So blocking enemy line of sight will be very important if you want to survive certain types of engagement, like long-range engagements where the enemy will be able to concentrate fire from a bunch of different units, right? And that's sort of a comment on the overall asymmetry of the two factions, right? The Martians have these very, very powerful units, but very few of them. And with these units, they have a lot of concentrated firepower, right? So they have a lot of individual abilities. The humans will have a large number of units, but one unit at a time, they're going to be very ineffective at dealing damage. See, we also have group selection. Currently no formations, but that will be a feature as well. You'll be able to set your tripods in a line formation, etc., etc. And that's pretty much the gist of what I want to show you guys. Let me think real quick about anything I haven't discussed. Well, there's a couple things. The enemy units, the human units, will have formations isn't the right word, but they will work with multiple models per unit, right? So kind of like in Total War, you have 3 or 4 different cannons per unit. It'll be the same thing with the humans, but with all of their units. Civilians will work like that. Infantry will work like that. You'll have squads of people with multiple models, again, to give you a more immersive experience of being able to count the number of models rather than having a discrete health bar. And one other thing I forgot to mention was the civilians, which I've mentioned a few times, but I haven't talked about yet. So the civilians will be a pretty important mechanic both for the Martians and the humans. It will give the humans another combat objective other than just destroy the Martians, right? And for the Martians, it will give them a priority objective that will drive their combat decisions. And basically this works by populating the map with non-playable AIs, and these will be civilians. And civilians will move between different places, like they'll go from their house to church or their workplace, etc., on pretty simple, basic, just movement loops. Different buildings on the map will also have civilians inside them, and if the building is attacked, the civilians will flee the building. And basically what this does is it gives the Martians the ability to harvest blood in melee with civilian units. So they can walk their machines over to a civilian, grab them, and get the blood out of them. And the blood will be used to use special abilities, and it will also carry over to the main map, so the strategic map. So you can kind of think of it like the winds of magic in Warhammer games, right? You want to collect this during the battle as the Martians, and as the humans, well, you have a different motivation, but you want to protect the civilians, right? Because the civilians are one of your resources. It provides you manpower, and the more civilians a district has, the more manpower the humans get out of that district. So let's say the Martians are attacking your district. Well, you want your manpower to be preserved, so you know that maybe you're going to lose this battle because the enemy has, too many tripods, you don't have enough defenders. So maybe your priority should be, well, let me get my cavalry unit, which is fast and has an ability to rally civilians, and let's race him down to the town square and pick up a bunch of civilians. Civilians will follow the cavalry now, and you move the cavalry to the edge of the map, and the civilians come with you. And once they reach the edge of the map, they move to an adjacent sector, district. This will allow you to increase the manpower that's available to you, and it will also prevent the Martians from obtaining that blood as a resource. You can see how this, over time, with a sector that's having continually being attacked, how this would eventually lead to like a sort of a scorched earth effect where the districts are not really valuable to either player anymore, or to the AI and the player. So again, adding an additional layer of complexity that wasn't in the original game, which should add a little bit more asymmetry and a little bit more of an interesting combat loop and motivations for combat. Okay, well, I think that's about it. I don't want to get in too deep for the first video here, but I hope you guys are as excited about this as I am, because this is pretty cool for me. I never really thought I'd have the opportunity to do this, to make this game, but it's shaping up pretty well, and I'm happy with what I've got so far. So stay tuned, and we'll get more updates soon. All right, bye-bye.